A pretty common request on both the YouTube comments and Patreon is for Badgerfang. Badgerpaw is a character from Code of the Clans, the third Warrior Cats field guide. Badgerpaw is made an apprentice during Broken Star's reign and dies in battle before he would have even been old enough to be properly apprenticed. It's not uncommon for people to claim that this character was in the original series. He was not. He did not come around until after the third series was completely over. So as a character in the whole Warrior Cats grand scheme of things, he's about as old as Dovewing. After appearing in Code of the Clans, he shows up again in 2012's Yellowfang's Secret, 2013's Ultimate Guide, and the much later Blackfoot's Reckoning in 2021. He was a kit born while Broken Star was in charge, and apprenticed much too young to Flintfang, taken to war, seriously wounded, and then Flintfang tells him everything he thinks he would want to hear while he was dying, including that he's going to be made a warrior and StarClan will allow him to pick his own name. He chooses the name Badgerfang after his mentor, and dies. And seemingly all of that was 100% correct because he shows up as Badgerfang twice in StarClan afterwards. He's expanded on a bit in different ways in Yellowfang's Secret and Blackfoot's Reckoning, but not by much, seeing as he's only there for a couple pages in both. See, Badgerfang isn't really a character. He's an enthusiastic apprentice, he doesn't fully understand he isn't old enough to be one yet, and that's basically the most of it. The books just don't really use him as a character. Most of what we know about him is other people thinking about him and other people talking about him. And even then, there isn't even much of that. He's more telling of the personalities of his mentor and Blackstar and his mother than he is of his own. Badgerfang is just a little guy, happy and optimistic and proud to be a ShadowClan warrior because he doesn't know any better and nobody will tell him any better. Flintfang himself reads as a complete follower, somebody with zero agency. In Blackfoot's Reckoning, he says, "We can't do anything to change this. Broken Star is our leader. We do what he says." And in Code of the Clans, his internal monologue talks about Badgerpaw's death like an inevitability, like he tried his best but there was nothing that could help. But he didn't have to take his nephew to battle, he could have disobeyed. Not breaking the warrior code was more important than the life of a child. Which, yes, is also against the warrior code, but we forget that one. For Flintfang, it's all a very Warrior Cats thought process, and so much determinism as usual. The mother, Fernshade, acts proud of him for going to battle in Yellowfang's Secret, but is distressed about him even being apprenticed in Blackstar's much later novella. So she's kinda got two that don't even line up with each other. Badgerpaw apparently learns well and quickly with no real trouble keeping up in a training sense, but he's just not powerful or large enough to fight a fully grown warrior. The sole factor ends up being his size. I think this is pretty accurate. Apprentices in Warrior Cats are described as small all the time, almost to the point where you will start questioning how big the authors think a 6-month-old cat should be. While it's not untrue that a 6-month-old cat is smaller than a fully grown one, Badgerfang and Broken Star are a situation where the age and size of the cat is pretty well reflected by the narrative. The reason that apprentices aren't kitten-sized, canonically in Warrior Cats, isn't because of cat biology, but instead because of stories like this one. It just, happens to actually be supported by cat biology. At 3 months, 12 weeks, a cat is relatively small. Their eyes are probably near the end of their color change, still a little bit dark from being that kittenish dark blue, but they're getting out of it. They are still very little, they are still very small, they still are very soft. A 6-month-old kitten likewise is much bigger. They look a lot like little cats at this age, and while they're usually pretty close to how tall they're gonna be, they're not nearly as filled out and will keep growing, but not really as quickly, for about a year after that. But the difference between a 6-month-old kitten and a 3-month-old one is massive in size, and a much bigger jump than between a kitten who's half a year old and an adult. So Badgerfang makes sense. Well, almost. See, I don't usually use this kind of phrasing, but Broken Star as a character, he's just not very logical. His plans don't make sense. He's putting kittens to work too early and killing them, and he's just doing that repeatedly. There's a logical failure going on here. During Broken Star's reign, he gets 4 named kittens killed. Previously 5, but Volpaw got retconned back into being alive vaguely recently. Not that this is new for Warrior Cats, a lot of things that the villains will impose culturally just don't make any logical sense whatsoever. BloodClan making it so that you can't live with your family members definitely doesn't make any sense. Maybe they were going for like a cult angle with that, but it doesn't make sense because everyone was already born inside the cult. It's like the opposite of cult behavior at that point. It's very similar to how either a bad guy will take over in Warrior Cats or someone will, lose faith in Warrior Cats and then immediately they just stop feeding the elders. Like, as if the only reason they were feeding the elders was some sort of weird religious demand and not because it's a good thing to do. Broken Star does that too, by the way. He stops feeding the elders. And this isn't because they were choosing to make Broken Star really unreasonable and stubborn in his unreasonability or something, because you could definitely look at it and go, well, he just didn't want to admit that he was wrong or something, but there's no evidence for that in the books. Any actual reasoning that you could come up with for why Broken Star still thinks this is a good idea is not the real reason as to why it just continues happening. The only reason is that he needed to be a really bad guy. He needed to be a really, really bad guy who did really bad things. Broken Star's first action as leader is apprenticing one of Featherstorm's tiny babies. Soon after, that initial apprentice, Mosspaw, is accidentally killed by all the other tiny babies, somehow. It's actually a very gross scene, and it gives me a bit of a horror feeling, like, oh, these kittens were training and they accidentally killed him. The book doesn't say how at all. They don't mention him bleeding or anything. The kitten squeals and dies. Broken Star says they got, quote, the angle wrong. How would this even happen when kits are attacking each other all the time in Warrior Cats? How would the kits even have the strength to be rough enough? Who knows? In Blackfoot's novella, they tell us that this was a broken neck. After they accidentally kill Mosspaw, Broken Star apprentices the rest of them, Little Paw, Wet Paw, Dawn Paw, Brown Paw, and Volpaw. Out of those in Yellowfang's secret, Volpaw dies and Brown Paw stops appearing after Into the Wild, so he's implied dead. Volpaw doesn't die in the recent manga, but he does die in Blackfoot's novella, which came out a year before. It's both the narrations of Yellowfang and Blackfoot that say that Volpaw died, not them saying it out loud and lying to anyone or anything that's deniable like that. Both of them fully believe that Volpaw's dead. So Volpaw coming back in the graphic novel is weird, especially when you consider there's Brown Paw, who is there, he's in these books, and just vanishes, and they could have used him instead. In Yellowfang's secret, we see Badgerpaw get born. We see his parents talk about how pretty he is and what a good name he has. Then we get a Snowkit situation where he's announced as an apprentice and then dies a few pages later in the same chapter. We don't get much new here, but there is a scene later on where the kid apprentices ask, hey, is Badgerfang really dead? And they're like, oh yeah, that means he's a real warrior now. This is great. It's fantastic. In the same chapter where Badgerfang dies, another litter is born, and later Broken Star kills both of them and blames it on Yellowfang. In the field guide before Code of the Clans, Cats of the Clans, they introduce a cat named Blossom Kit, who died because of Broken Star. We do not see Blossom Kit in any actual books. The Warrior Cat's family tree gives her a sibling named Swamp Kit. We don't see him in any books. Additionally, the Warrior Cat's website provides us with more weird, suspicious dead Shadow Clan kits. Ashheart has a dead litter of 3, and Darkflower, who doesn't show up until Fire and Ice, is given a dead kit too, so who knows what they're trying to imply there. When it comes to named dead kittens, it could be as low as 4 or as high as 10 as to how many Broken Star got killed. So Broken Star took the last 2 kits into the woods, fought them too hard personally, and killed both. A lot of Yellowfang's secret is spent on a fox that Yellowfang thinks killed these kits, and that's led a lot of people to think that it was in fact a fox. But it never really reaches the conclusion that Broken Star killed them personally. But in Into the Wild, it was in fact Broken Star who did this, so that's what's real. And then, as you know, he runs out, so he decides to kidnap ThunderClan kittens instead. The whole plan is really ridiculous. Kits all grow at the same rate. If he has a lot of them, then he's going to have a lot of apprentices if he just waits like 2 months. Being impatient and apprenticing them early is just wasting resources. If ShadowClan has 5 or 6 kittens, then it's going to have 5 or 6 apprentices in less than a year. The whole plan would only make sense if the kittens weren't dying. Sending an untrained cat into battle doesn't give you a strategic advantage. Especially if the cat is so small it can be killed instantly, like Badgerfang was. Any competent evil dictator would see that he's just killing too many kids and go, well, that was a bust, let's try something else. Why be evil if your evil plan is causing immediate harm to your business? Like, maybe if they explained it in a way that implied ShadowClan benefited from the behavior at all, it would be different, but there's nothing. But all of that aside, Badgerfang is just a piece of all this, a sad, morbid little story about an ineffective kitten somebody kills in battle. We don't know who it is who killed him besides a WindClan warrior, but that doesn't really matter. as even if we did know, the blame would get placed on the mystery warrior and not the several people who could have prevented it within the story, or, the leader of the clan that caused all of this. We don't see his immediate rise to StarClan, but we do know he is allowed by them to be a warrior and carry his warrior name Badgerfang like his mentor told him. Unfortunately, though, this sort of thing isn't awarded to all of the Kits who go to StarClan, and Badgerfang got to be Badgerfang alongside those still named things like Moss Kit and Swiftpaw. He doesn't grow older, though. He stays at his 3.5, 4-moon-old size. Unlike 3 other characters also in Code of the Clans that have a very similar but more extreme thing going on. There are 3 Kits that were allowed to grow into full adults in StarClan, one of them a leader after they drowned. These 3 characters are the only ones in all of Warrior Cats to do this, and it's unsettling because of that. If it's within StarClan's power to allow spirits to age, why doesn't this happen to the dozens of other dead Kit characters, especially considering how StarClan makes it seem like these kittens need to be taken care of as kittens forever? But at the same time, we have characters like Fluttering Bird, who died as a kitten but exists as an ancient knowing entity. Let them grow up, please! Kittens are born very weird and gross and not strong enough to walk, so the idea of a stillborn kitten walking around and playing scares me. And the fact that the kittens need to be taken care of in heaven creates another issue. What if their parent went to hell or rejected them? While I'm sure there's a million daisies up there, what kind of experience is guaranteed to a kitten in StarClan anyway? Does a dead StarClan kitten still need a parent properly if it's been 20 years since they died? If we say that Appledusk took on Mapleshade's kittens in StarClan, would Reedshine's death disrupt that? Or the possible death of one of her kittens? Can we trust an Appledusk in StarClan to be a responsible parent to 3 children for the rest of eternity? Obviously, this is a rhetorical question. I am not making a statement about how good or bad of a father I think Appledusk is, and I don't think we have enough information to actually answer that question. But what I am saying is that StarClan kittens are very confusing and very weird, and if they have the power to let them grow up, why don't they? Anyway, Badgerfang we see twice in StarClan. Both times he is a baby. Both are leader ceremonies. He's excitable and sweet in Blackfoot's, charging towards him and being giddy about it. Although he's seemingly taking it seriously, he's very affectionate towards Blackfoot. He's much more stern with Tigerstar, meanwhile, who he glares at and scolds. Granted, everyone in Tigerstar's leadership ceremony scolded him. He also mentions his littermates fighting alongside him here, which he's never seen having any. Not in Yellowfang's Secret or any other media. He doesn't betray much otherwise, although the lives he gives both directly relate back to his situation. But overall, there just isn't much to him. Most of his appearances only last a couple pages. He's not got a lot of unique personality, largely just being a stock Kit character type, and what he represents for Warrior Cats is making the reader sad.